What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Body Lock. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with my good friend, the CEO, the CPA, the DNA, PIMP, Pat Auger. Pat, what's going on?
Not much, man. I actually don't have my CPA, but maybe I'll get it just so I can add some more initials there.
I know you'll have it next week. You get new initials with every hour. You get a new letter added to your name. So Pat, we are here to discuss. Of course, 2020 is now in the rearview mirror, and since the year has passed, it's time to have our retrospectives and reflect back on was probably the craziest year in the history of the sport, probably the craziest year in the history of the world, at least the craziest year in the history of our generation, certainly. Although I think I'm older, so I might technically be in a different generation, but that's another story. Pat, we are discussing the knockout of the year. What spectacular knockouts we had all year. MMA never disappoints on finishes, particularly knockouts, but I think as the level of striking has risen in mixed martial arts, we're seeing more than just the overhand right KO. We're seeing, the nominees for this year were a wide range of ground and pound strikes to flying kicks to knees to very precisely timed boxing centered counters and combinations. So Pat, we're going to list what the survey was amongst the Body Lock staff. We voted on this along with plenty of other colleagues here at the site. But anyway, Joaquin Buckley, no shock there, wins it with his, what do you call it? He got his leg caught and he did the jumping back spin kick, or was that a jumping back side kick? Same technique essentially for all you MMA martial arts nerds out there. But then we had Kevin Holland, his knockout over Jacare Souza, the strike from the ground, that got second place, and third was Mamed Khalidov versus Scott Askham at KSW, another flying kick there. Pat, do you agree with these, or what was your votes?
Yeah, those were actually my three votes in that order. So for me, this survey reflected what I selected. For me, the closest to by far were the Kevin Holland knockout of Souza and the Joaquin Buckley knockout of Impa Kasanganay. I believe I'm saying that right. So, in that one, it's one of those things where I watched those KOs multiple times, and I really had trouble picking between the two. And for me, I went with Buckley's KO simply because it's such a rare thing to see something like that, especially with the dazed and then just fall over. It was essentially a walk-off spinning kick KO, right? No further strikes needed, just done. The Holland KO was great as well, but I do rewatching it. One thing I know a lot of people talked about from the ground, he didn't have the torque power, but rewatching it, he got one hit off the ground that kind of stunned him, and then as he was getting up, he landed the rest. And I think he had that power there. And also Jacare is old. It might just be my bias too, because I love Jacare and I'm sad that he got wrecked, but that's what I had. So for me, again, perfect order. Khalidov knockout with that flying kick was amazing as well. What about you? What did you have for the KO of the year?
I've actually gone so against the grain with a lot of our colleagues here, because the Joaquin Buckley knockout is considered just consensus the knockout of the year. Some people calling it the greatest knockout in all of the UFC's history, or if not MMA overall. I think that's a bit of a stretch as well. I mean, I had the number one being Kevin Holland over Jacare for several reasons. One being the level of opposition that he was facing. I think that's a big factor, because you can step into the gym if you train before. You can step into the gym against someone who doesn't know what they're doing, and you probably could knock them out fairly easily. But try that against someone who is world class, or at least someone on your same level. Things get much more difficult there. So I think while Kasanganay is not, he's no slouch. He's not Jacare Souza. He's not a former Strikeforce champion who has been a perennial middleweight contender in the UFC for the better part of 8-9 years, something like that. So I think we have to factor in the level of opposition, and then also the techniques. What Buckley did was incredible. absolutely incredible. And I don't want to sell him short whatsoever. Give that man his flowers because he did something incredible in just acrobatic, athletic, amazing to watch, something that I could not pull off on my best day. But we've seen plenty of spinning kick knockouts. A spin kick is one of the more forceful moves that someone can apply. That generates so much force. And while it's not common, it's not as rare as it once was. Like we're talking about like Edson Barboza, Terry Adam. At that time, like that was just totally rare to see a fight ended with a spin kick KO. Since then, we've seen, Wonder Boy, we've seen Vita Belfort, we've seen a few people in fights with the spin kick. But how often do you see someone knock someone out from their back? How often does that happen? The mechanics behind that are just blow my mind. That man was flat on his back, leaned up, just did that winging right hook, clipped him, and of course that wasn't the one that put him out, but the follow-ups were insane. Like the whole sequence was amazing, and I think that was probably the most amazing sequence of mixed martial arts that we had in 2020, much less just the knockout of the year. So Kevin Holland wins this one to me, hands down.
And, again, it was so close for me. I definitely hear what you're saying. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I don't believe, I know we had seen one other off the back.
Nico Price and Randy Brown.
Price. Yeah.
Is the only one I can think of.
Right. Which is impressive, but it was different. That's true. I mean, the way Kevin Holland did it was ridiculous. You're right. That whole sequence was insane, especially with Jacare just kind of like slouching back, eating those shots. It was a sight to see. And I'm glad you brought up the level of opposition, because I think this is something where, obviously the Buckley KO had more theatrics, right? You had Kasanganay literally like go goofy-eyed and then fall on his back. That whole thing obviously is part of the reason it went viral. That Kanye did a song about it, right? All this stuff, which is it's a trash song. But
I mean, Buckley deserves to get knocked down a peg because that Kanye song sucked.
Yeah.
Just saying.
but the opposition, that actually factored in the other way for me, in the sense that Kasanganay was undefeated. He's young. He's eaten a lot of shots in some of his fights. The Kalen Hill fight in Contender Series, I mean, that dude hits, and he ate some of those shots, walked through him, and he's younger, and that just completely, took him out. Jacare, on the other hand, he's old, man. I hate it, but he's 41 now. We've seen him in a couple fights get stung or get rocked by things that young Jacare could have withstood. I mean, the Gastelum fight comes to mind, where that shot wasn't even a direct hit, so to speak, and Jacare was hurt bad. He survived the round, and that was 2 years ago at this point. It's tough, because for me, I think part of the reason is, Jacare is at that point in his career where his chin is gone and is a little bit more susceptible. That's not taken away from Kevin Holland's power, because I'm pretty sure he could have done that to most anyone. But I actually took in that opposition a little bit on the other side, because I think Jacare is at the real tail end of his career here. But I'm not mad with that decision in terms of you putting, Holland over Buckley. It was razor thin. Make sure you like and subscribe to the video. Hit the notification button. Let us know who your pick for the knockout of the year was. But I mean, I'm not mad at all at that. It was between those two. If you said any other one, then maybe we'd have a discussion. But
yeah, I think we have a good 1A, 1B argument there. Now the KSW knockout, Khalidov versus Askham, pretty impressive. Pretty impressive knockout there. Just for my jump kick finishes, if I wanted to be an elitist, it just didn't have the visceral effect to me. That was the one thing missing from that. Spectacular technique, beautiful execution. It just didn't feel like that KO of the year feels like death. That didn't feel like death. Felt like critical condition. I don't know.
I could see that. Yeah. I mean, it definitely wasn't the instant kind of, oh, this is over type of thing that we saw in, Buckley versus Kasanganay, or in Holland versus Jacare, where, that slouch. If we're talking about the last moments of the knockout, I would lean that towards Holland versus Jacare, just to see him slouch and basically fall into a puddle of, unconsciousness.
Human flesh.
Yeah. Yes. Although it's hard to take away from Kasanganay, with the eyes of the fallback, but we've seen that type of thing before. I don't know if we've seen, someone just straight melt as somebody's getting up and pummeling them down. So yeah, those two definitely felt like exclamation points on the fight, whereas, the Khalidov kick was great, but not the same thing. I would agree in terms of not a whoa, I like a double take type of finish.
Right. And it's still great finish. So don't want to take anything away from that. But that was actually why that visceral nature was actually why that didn't make my top three so the format that we voted in for all those who don't work at Body Lock, which I imagine everyone watching this, we had to pick three options for our first, second, and third. So I went first for Kevin Holland, second for Joaquin Buckley, third I went with Cody Garbrandt against Rafael Assunção. Now that was one where the technique was spectacular, it was so sharp. Granted, it was a punch, and punches, just a standing punch combination just doesn't seem too exotic considering some of the entries we had this year. But man, it was so beautifully executed. It was such a perfect counter. And Cody Garbrandt at his best is one of the best pure boxers in mixed martial arts. When he's not, when the knucklehead part of his brain hasn't turned on yet and he's fighting smart, that man is one of the sharpest with his hands in the sport by far. And I think that was just the perfect display to be back against the fence, to see that hook coming, duck under, and land with his own. I was reminded of his knockout loss against Pedro Munoz, and I believe it was UFC 235, which I attended, and that same sequence played out completely different. He had his back against the fence, ducked under, and then proceeded to go knucklehead, then proceeded to stick his chin out and just start winging bombs. And that performance right there against the Assunção, that moment showed a lot of growth, a lot of maturity, and not to mention one of the best finishes that we had all year. So that was my number three pick.
Yeah, and that's not a bad number three at all. You're right that the technique that Garbrandt showed in that finish was very high level, near flawless, right? And in terms of Garbrandt, it's one of those things where he's always had that striking ability, and a lot of people have forgotten since he lost the belt. If you go back and just rewatch the Dominic Cruz fight, where he's just on point in every step of the way, he looks unstoppable, untouchable even. And then you turn to his recent fights where he's been sticking his chin out. He has no striking defense. It's been sad to see him, get knocked out and just essentially lose fights for being wild, as you said. This was a completely changed Garbrandt, and it was a beautiful right hand that laid Assunção out. It definitely deserves to be in the conversation of knockout of the year, and I think that probably would have been my fourth. I have to go back and look at the nominations, but it was up there for me as well.
So I'm going to try to see if I can access the form now. Okay, good. I can still access it. So look at some of the other options that we had. Chaos Williams against Alhassan, definitely one that stands out. I think also too that was the expectations of that fight, that we knew it was going to be such a violent collision. We just and we thought it would be a finish, but just didn't expect it to be like that quick. So definitely deserves its place there. And the other was Alex Pereira versus Powell. So certainly some good choices that we had to pick from. So you know what to do. Go in those comments. Tell us what your top three KOs were. Tell everybody how I'm right and they're wrong. Okay. So like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends, and stay tuned to the Body Lock for more end of 2020 discussion. Pat, always a pleasure, my man. We'll be doing this again real soon, I'm sure.
Definitely will. And now that I'm thinking about it, switch kick knockout, Paige Van Zandt versus Beck Rawlings. That was that exclamation point you were looking for. I know that's what was going.
That was, these things. You know what? That deserves another initial.